situation going there?
So we got a bunch of piping yesterday. Let me stop the recording so we don't go this. And this morning we're going to start setting up that pool. We have to also do all the piping for the gutters and stuff.
Situation going there.
So we got a bunch of piping yesterday. Sorry, let me stop the record. Sorry. So yeah, that's where that's at. So a lot of work today. It's like the only non-rainy day in like the next 2 weeks or something. So we really got to move fast today.
For those of you who aren't aware, our well is failing there at Audaria, so it's kind of an emergency. So Vrinaranya and Gurnishta are trying to set up a water catchment system for the rain, which is quite an endeavor, but they're in the middle of it. And it's quite costly too if anyone wants to help us, because we have to buy these big 5,000-gallon tanks. We probably need about 6 or something like that of them, and they're not cheap at all. So we happen to have one 5,000-gallon tank on site, which has been there for fire protection. So we'll be using that, and then they, as Chris said, they just got one more 5,000-gallon tank. So.
You're digging another well?
Yeah, Agni's asked if we dig another well. It's only $25,000 for a well. And you can't be sure that you're going to get water. There's definitely water falling from the sky annually, but when all's said and done, to be honest with you, it's going to cost about the same for the water catchment system. But at least we know there'll be, we have that. Well, still works a little, but it's very diminished. It only pumps for a few minutes and then goes off. And, anyway, that's a detail. How much it's giving, not very much. But so you're making some progress with that too.
Yeah. Also, one point to mention to Agni is that the wells, if you let them sit for a few years, they like recharge. So what we're thinking of doing is we'll have the water catchment, and then we'll give the well a break. So then a couple of years it should start giving a decent amount again. So we don't need to actually drill a new well.
Yeah.
Work with the rain.
Working with the rain. Yeah. So they're setting up pipes and gutters and things like that. And then we've got to acquire, we'll try to gradually acquire more tanks. They're pretty big, 5,000-gallon tank. So always fun living in rural areas.
Yep.
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, so there was one special request from Mara Mohandas, who's doing the interpretation. If you could speak a little slower than last week.
Okay.
Okay, and let's.
Mohan from Chile.
Yes.
Okay. You want to start the recording again?
Yeah. So it's recording now, and the first question is from Sadhvi.
Dandavas Guru Maharaj. Yes, my question was about, once you said some time ago that in the beginning one cannot really understand the scriptures properly on his own, so Guru needs to give the understanding and explain the meaning. But with the time, with advancement on the path, one can actually understand the scriptures. So I was wondering, is it that we study deeply the scriptures, and this is how, with the time and listening from the Guru, we start understanding them? Or is it that it's out of, because of our advancement and sadhana and sadhu sangha, we can actually start understanding the scriptures by that? How is the process? In which direction? I was wondering. Just.
No, I think it's a little bit of both. And there's different levels of understanding. So I think it may be difficult in the beginning to even understand theoretically. And theoretical understanding can be acquired by practice, study, employing various tools for study that, for example, someone would do in academics. Just not that you have to become an academic, but there are things that we could, tools, as I say, that we could employ and study habits and, ways of approaching the texts and so forth and so on, which might include, for example, learning some of the language, learning some Bengali, Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. And that is more of an exercise that amounts to kind of spiritualizing one's intellect, at least for the sadhaka. Now, it's not going to necessarily spiritualize the intellect of an academic who takes Indology as his or her subject and decides to study Gaudiya Vaishnavism and ends up knowing the theory better than many devotees, but is not a devotee oneself. But nonetheless, their academic approach to the matter is more of a from down, to up, using the tools that are at our disposal and our intellect unto itself. So we can do that as devotees, and that will bring us to one level of understanding the scripture. Now, the other level of understanding the scripture is requires the opposite, or the second thing that you asked. So both things are required. That means realization, feeling for the texts, and so forth. That it starts to speak to you in corresponding with your purified heart, your feelings for the subject, and so on and so forth. That it enables you to bring out insights that have not been brought out before. You can study other tikas and so forth and repeat them and so on, but and that's useful. But and the latter, of course, is our objective, and so it's a mix of both. Study of the scripture is recommended by Krishna in the Gita. One who studies this sacred conversation between myself and Arjuna is dear to me, and so forth. And commentators there tend to refer to such study as Gyan Yogya, so the sacrifice of knowledge. Here, the knowledge is Sambandha Gyan. It means knowledge. It's different than just the oneness between Atma and Brahman. The extent to which the Atma is one with Brahman is not necessarily part of Sambandha Gyan. Sambandha Gyan is the nature of knowledge of Krishna, what he's like, the difference between Krishna and Mahavishnu, and so on and so forth. The knowledge of the path of bhakti, and so on. So, although it's referred to as Gyan Yogya, the Gyan there, for the devotees studying the Gita, is Sambandha Gyan. So, in that way, we include it as part of bhakti. But it's something that some devotees are going to be more inclined naturally to study the scripture, and those are the ones you have to watch out for. Because it can go to their head, they can think they've gone somewhere just by acquiring some theoretical knowledge and being able to regurgitate it, and everybody thinks, oh, she's so advanced, she knows so many things, and so on and so forth. Srila Maharaj used to emphasize this point, emphasize it to me, not because I'm that type, I guess I am that type to some extent, but he emphasized to me to emphasize to others of that type. I guess he was talking to me too, now that I think about it more. But he said you have to hammer on them, Gyan Shunya Bhakti, Gyan Shunya Bhakti, Gyan Shunya Bhakti. Bhakti unencumbered by knowledge is our goal. So we have to get, that's why I say we acquire knowledge, scriptural knowledge, with our head in order to, it's not a goal unto itself. It's for the purpose of softening the heart. So you have to use the head to soften the heart. And then our investment, our advancement would be measured more by our taste for Harinam. Yeah. So does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
So the term is used by Rupa Goswami regarding someone who is superlative with regard to treading the path. The Uttam Adhikari says, Shastra Nipun, Shastra Yukti. Shastra Yukti means he or she has the capacity to reason about the argument of the scripture, land on her feet, and draw out the implications and so forth. And Shastra Nipun means genius, scriptural genius. So who can I want to differentiate that from just somebody who's memorized, the whole Bhagavad Gita, for example, or the whole Bhagavatam. There are people like that, or many verses. And so it's not a question of quantity of memorization, but the ability to give those kind of novel answers, like, is there any real sex life in the spiritual world? And you say, no, there's no real sex life in the material world. That's not a verse, but that's a kind of an answer. Even Prabhupada would say, why don't you go there and find out? That's that, like that, call that kind of, that's scriptural genius. That's like, Sajjan Maharaj sent me a quote of my own self some time back. I forget what that was, but it was in regard to this. It was a nice quote. I have to look it up because I've got all my emails from him. Wish I had it on the tip of my tongue, but that can all go away too with time. Your memory is going to fail and so on, and for good reasons too. Pujapat Sridhar Maharaj once said, in the last days, really, of his manifest presence, that he had a dream, and in his dream, all his scriptural knowledge was taken away. And he was left only with his faith as the vehicle, to go the distance. It was very inspiring to hear him say that. So he had a fair amount. He was called Shastra Nipun once by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Sridhar Maharaj, Shastra Nipun, scriptural genius. And he was a scholar, Sanskrit scholar, had many of his own original Sanskrit compositions, some of which were very much appreciated by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and by all of his peers, also praises of Bhakti Vinod and of Bhaktisiddhanta in Astakams and so forth. So imagine all that was taken away from him. He said he had only his face left. All right, so Sajjan, you had a question? You can't remember that quote. You should look it up.
I sent you that quote?
Yeah, you sent it in the context of something in an email to me sometime back. I quoted one thing nice to you, and you said, that's very nice, and you said this too, and you liked it very much. I'd have to look it up. It's very nice.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look and see if I could find that in our past correspondence and like that. Jai Maharaj. So Dandavats, and speaking of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, I was reflecting quite deeply on the principle he gave about thesis and antithesis and synthesis, which he might have gotten that initially from Hegel, along with a couple of other things like that. But it came to me, I did not read, and what I'm about to mention, I did not read anywhere or hear from anyone else, but I thought it was worth running by you to see what you thought of it. This principle of thesis, antithesis and synthesis, it seems to have had some very profound applications in the development of our own Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, such as, for example, Nityananda Prabhu, it is said in all of the authorized biographies, it is said that he preceded Mahaprabhu coming to the world, and Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur specifically refers to him on a number of occasions as Akrodananda, Paramananda, like that. One who is unconditionally blissful all the time and never becomes angry, like that, just in that one little phrase right there. Whereas there's our thesis, and then by contrast, it could be said that Mahaprabhu was, it's in all of his authorized biographies, he displayed as part of his divine Leela anger, perhaps a bit of violence on a number of occasions. And not only that, but he did not display, again, as part of his Nitya Leela, he did not display the characteristic of being unconditionally blissful at all times. For example, in that story about Srivasa Thakur's mother-in-law being in the basket in the Kirtan hall, Mahaprabhu said, "Oh, I can't feel any happiness. There's someone present who should not be." Just that's one example. There are others also, of course, but that's the one that kind of stands out for me in the moment. So it could be said, again, this is just an impression, that he was like something like an antithesis of Nityananda Prabhu, which then yielded by that synthesis such wonderful devotees who came after, such as the Goswamis and Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasa Acharya, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, etc., like that. And then the second kind of, again, impression that came to me was the same happened again in the case of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who, as you yourself mentioned, he was very, very liberal-minded, and he appreciated Thoreau and Emerson and so many different types of spiritual and religious and philosophical expressions. Jesus as well, perhaps. Whereas by contrast, again, apparently it would seem as if Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was something like an antithesis of Srila Bhaktivinoda, in that he was quoted as saying, "Oh, I came all the way to Vrindavan and I could not find a single Vaishnava, even among the Vaishnavas of Vrindavan," we could say. So, but yet from that thesis and antithesis yielded the most beautiful synthesis of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Sridhar Maharaj and yourself and so many other wonderful devotees who came after them like that. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of run those impressions, just, impressions that came from within, by you to get your impression on that.
Very much a quick reminder, if you could slow down. Thank you.
Right. Well, I don't know if the synthesis, antithesis, thesis applies so much to what you're talking about, maybe in a broad way, but nonetheless, what you're talking about is the fact that that there's a fair amount of diversity in terms of the way in which Bhagwan, in the case of, for example, Nityananda Prabhu, you cited, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, conducted themselves in relation to the public, in relation to other devotees, and also amongst devotees who all have the same objective. They may conduct themselves and express themselves quite differently, And some of that, I think, is relative to what they're called upon, as far as the devotees, called upon in terms of time and circumstance. And some of it is also just relative to their own disposition. I think on a lower level, they may have a certain disposition. On a higher level, they may be used for a certain purpose, and speak in a certain way, be used by Bhagawan, in those circumstances. Prabhupada tended, I'll give you an example of that. Prabhupada tended to be very, very literal in a sense. He would, when he was asked questions like, what do the 5 horses of, on the chariot of Arjuna mean? He said, means it takes about 5 horses to draw the chariot. He wanted like metaphorical answers and so forth, because he didn't want the chariot to disappear and the Leela to disappear into being just a metaphor that speaks about something other than the fact that there's an ontological reality that we call Leela. He wanted to ground devotees in that. And, at a time, circumstances where other persons representing Hinduism, yoga, and whatnot, were tend to speak more metaphorically, with Nirvisesh Brahman ultimately being the goal, where anything that happens is thought to be, or any dispensation is thought to be a teaching that ends up in undifferentiated Brahman. So he very much wanted to avoid that. So that's an example of how he spoke literally, but in many ways he did. We found it very useful because when I was young and I wanted to meditate, I used to ask people how to meditate, and people just said, well, you just meditate. And now there's just like 10,000 books out there how to meditate, and probably about 99,999 of them are, or don't understand what meditation is, so it's very confusing and problematic. But Prabhupada really gave like handles, hold on, you do it like this, not like that, and so forth. And it was very useful, because if you grabbed onto those handles and did it like that and didn't do it the other way, and so forth, it very much lent itself to practice as he was outlining it to experience, having experience. And of course, when you have the experience, the deeper the experience is, then the more you see the handles and the rules and the way to do it more as a technique, if you will, rather as a detail, I should say, rather than a principle, and so forth. So although he was like that and he spoke like that, if you look more closely at Prabhupada, if you knew him, you find that he had this whole other side, if you will, which wasn't like that at all. It was very liberal, open-minded, gray, and so on and so forth. But he seemed to be used by Krishna in a particular way, and during his time, to speak about it in such a way that he could be and has been nowadays looked at by some persons as kind of very conservative, very, very, very not as like more black and white, let's say.
Sure.
But I think this is an instance of Bhagavan Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taking over his Antakaram, Nityananda Prabhu, and using him in a particular way. That was, as I said, it was very, very useful. It gave the devotees experience in comparison to many others who were flirting with meditation and so forth, and so on. It gave them conviction and experience, and a very extraordinary thing happened, obviously, for Chaitanya Vaishnavism, for Hinduism, and so on. So, as I say, the way in which devotees act differently in relation to the public and other devotees may depend on their different personal dispositions as Vaishnavas, and also by the way in which Bhagavan decides to use them regardless of their dispositions and personalities and so forth. You mentioned Bhakti Siddhanta and Bhakti Vinod. Yeah, they're kind of like, they appear to be diametrically opposed at times, but no one would know, no one in the world outside of Bengal would know Bhakti Vinod Thakur if it weren't for Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he put him, brought him, introduced him to the whole world. But Bhakti Vinod Thakur was dealing with circumstances in Gaudiya Vaishnavism that called for some reform, but he did it in a kind of in like a needle, and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur out like a plow. Some of the followers of Bhakti Vinod Thakur thought that Bhakti Siddhanta was not representative of Bhakti Vinod, was deviant from him and so forth, but actually, as I say, no one could have given more recognition to Bhakti Vinod and put him on the world stage, introduced him, published his books, and so on and so forth. This is all really the work of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he saw the need to conduct himself in a different way. And he was somewhat of, obviously, had his own unique personality as well. So again, both things are applicable. Yes, Nityananda Prabhu, just some thoughts about that. Never gets angry, but he kicked Shivananda Sen in the chest. So
I remember that. Yeah, I do remember. That's an exception.
Shivananda Sen really appreciated it quite a bit. So
yes.
But yeah, I think Vrindavan Das was reflecting on the contrasting ways in which Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reacted to Jagai and Madai.
Sure.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became angry because of the way they dealt with Nitai, and Nityananda Prabhu stopped him, and pleaded the case of mercy over justice.
Right.
So that's probably it's such a big event there, such a significant leela of the time, that he was probably reflecting on that. He himself, on the other hand, Vrindavan Das Thakur, approaches the matter quite differently from Krishnadas Kaviraj, even though the latter refers to Bhakti Siddhanta, to Vrindavan Das Thakur, defers to him and his work and so on. There's a reason for that. First of all, he preceded, so he was a senior in that sense to Krishnadas Kaviraj. He was a direct disciple of Nityananda Prabhu, and of course Vrindavan Das Thakur emphasized and brought out in much greater detail the Navadvip Leelas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which to enter into which is the goal, whereas Vrindavan Chaitanya Charitamrita Krishnadas Kaviraj emphasized the Madhya Leela of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his sannyas. That's the central focus of his book, which is the way. So in a sense, Vrindavan Das focused on the goal, but bringing out in more detail the Navadvip Leela, where we want to enter. And Vrindavan Das, the way, by emphasizing the teachings and the Rupa and Sanatan, the Sankirtan, preaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, how he conducted himself as a public figure, rather than as a hometown boy. Of course, each of them covers all three of the Leelas, Adi Leela, Madhya Leela, and Anti Leela, but in greater detail. I think that's one of the reasons that Krishnadas Kaviraj defers to Vrindavan Das, but they're very different relative to your comments, in that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is very much known, if you will, in his book from his statement that anyone who, what does he say? Anyone who hears my name loses
their piety, something like that. Yeah.
And anyone who chants my name commits sinful acts.
Yes.
And I'm nothing but a worm in the stool, something like that. So very, very intense humility. Of course, we agree with him philosophically. That's another thing. What we say is, yes, anyone who hears his name will lose their good karma.
Mm.
And anyone who chants his name will be freed from their bad karma. Mm-hmm. Krishnadas Kabiraj Goswami Mahashaya Ki Jai. But his humility is very much underscored there, and he is a little bit. He has a little bit of aggression, and he's establishing sectarian boundaries of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, distinguishing it from Madhva Sampradaya, from Shankar, and so forth. So there's a little bit of that there, but overall he's quite humble, and now you take Vrindavan Das Thakur, he is known for his famous statement that if, and having said this, if someone does not take shelter of Nityananda Prabhu, then I kick on his head with shoes, something like that.
Yeah. I'm still recovering from having studied the Caitanya-Bhagavata and reading the statements. I'm just recovering from all that now. It's traumatizing.
Quite opposite in that regard. Bhaktisiddhanta said, well, he says that because of course, if you get hit on the head with the shoes of Krishnadas Kaviraj, that would be good for you. But he could not tolerate that people would not take advantage of this dispensation of Gaura. But anyway, they seem to have different dispositions. Of course, they have different sentiments too. One is a kind of a feisty from the internal perspective, cowherds, and those cowherds are very inclined towards Vira Rasa. Yudha Vira means the heroism of Yudha, fighting, which they do amongst themselves and challenge the demons and so on and so. Prabhupada once said that yes, and we will take over the world, and we will have the bomb or something like that. And if someone doesn't agree to chant, we'll drop the bomb or something like that. He could make statements like that. One of my godbrothers, Giriraj Maharaj, asked me, "How would you deal with that? In preaching?" I said, "Oh, that is Yudhavira in the context of his Sakya Rasa." He's coming. He liked that answer very, very much. So you have to take it Bhav. Sometimes it's based on the Bhav they're speaking, and has to be looked at in that light. I mean, Prabhupada would never drop a bomb on anybody, or shoot anybody, or anything of the sort. But Prabhupada would make bombastic statements like that, if you will. I'll give a slight contrast. It comes to mind of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. They were godbrothers, of course, and they had very different dispositions. One of our godbrothers, Bhakti Kanandgiri Maharaj, he used to disciple of Prabhupada, took sannyas from Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. Well, he was preaching in North America, and I think he was a book distributor. I had trained him as a book distributor many years earlier. He was distributing books maybe in the Dallas airport, in Dallas, Texas. And then devotees came and threatened him from the ISKCON temple, and with very sectarian perspective, and threatened him, and so forth. They threatened him, and they scoped out his house, and he knew they were there, so he got a little worried. So he bought a gun to protect himself. And then he didn't have to use it, but when he came shortly thereafter to visit with Pujyapat Sridhar Maharaj, Guru Maharaj would ask us, what's the news? And there was always some ISKCON is doing this, and because we were a small group, and ISKCON was a little more antagonistic, and at the time, we were a little more feisty as well, I suppose, as to our choices and for why. Anyway, the story was told, and he said, "Oh, Canongiri. He called him Canongiri.
Oh, Canongiri.
So now you are a Canongiri because you have a cannon."
Yeah.
He said, "You should take that gun," and I think it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the guru or the GBC or something there. Bring it to him and give it to him, and say, "Here, let me. I'll give you assistance. If you want to get rid of me, here's the gun." Something like that. That was his disposition.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how he instructed. So he wasn't ever a fighter. Pujyapat Sridhar Maharaj was not. I mean, he would argue for the cause and so forth, but he was almost too liberal. It makes it hard to debate because you can say, well, you got a point over there on that side. It's a way of thinking about it. So, but so they were very different. Yeah. So different devotees have different dispositions, and just like the market, there are many cars, different kinds to buy, different people, all different products, any number of them. Any good product, make another one, and somebody else will buy that one instead of the first one. So the many minds in the market as well, right? So
Yes.
Market of the holy name, then devotees will be moved in different ways by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to make his dispensation available, and we'll be moved by one and respect all. Maybe moved by more than one, but primarily one, and respect everyone, something like that. So, some thoughts. What else?
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
The next question is from Krishna Kanai.
Wait, we have a follow-up question here from
Okay.
Krishna, so please hold on.
The ability to see.
Can you speak up?
The ability to see the Svarupa Shakti manifesting in a variety of ways. Is that a discernment that comes with in time advancement, expressed itself this way?
Sure, it's asking, is the ability to see the Svarupa Shakti manifesting different ways something that will come with one's advancement? Yeah, I mean, Krishna Shakti bine nahi na tar pravartan. So one cannot successfully, this is a statement from Chaitanya Charitamrita, spread the Sankirtan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu without Krishna Shakti. So, you look at what Prabhupada did, for example, spreading Sankirtan all over the world, you have to conclude that he had Krishna Shakti. If you had a little bit of a philosophical, understanding of how these things work, you could have put that, together. And the very idea that great devotees move in the world under the influence of the Svarupa Shakti. That's a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritim ashrita. So, I think that with a little bit of knowledge in this regard to how the Svarupa Shakti makes ingress into the devotee's life, and from the very beginning, but at a certain point it becomes prominent and particular, and as a result, as the ingress intensifies, to bring out one's destiny, and to cause one to function in the world under that influence. And you're asking about, I assume, how to detect, that someone's movements, devotees' movements, are being driven by the Svarupa Shakti. Well, they're either driven by the Svarupa Shakti or they're driven by the Maya Shakti. So, Sadhaka Deya, up until bhava is a work in progress. So I would say at least below nishta, most of the devotees have both influences. And there's a struggle there. It's like climbing a mountain. So going up the one side is hard. Once you get to the top, going down the other side into the valley, that's easy in comparison. Go to the top, you have the theory that there's a valley on the other side. So you got to go up, and you got to have ropes attached to you so that you can fall, but you can't go down the bottom. You can't. So you never lose. You're standing in bhakti, you may slip down, but the rope is there holding it. So the struggle up, you can see devotees are being driven sometimes to some extent by Maya Shakti, sometimes by Svarupa Shakti. When they become nishta, then the influence of Maya Shakti is there in the form of seeds of desire, but they're not, as that nishta really progresses, they're not being given a chance to fructify. It's like if you take water and flood a seed, it's going to get flooded. It's not going to sprout. So the flood of continuous bhakti, which is the idea of nishta, won't allow them to fructify, and instead, then the seeds, if you will, of bhakti will flower into ruchi and then asakti. So, devotees in these stages are going to be moved by the Svarupa Shakti, what to speak of bhava, which is that stage in which the sadhaka deha has been spiritualized. Now, you will see, of course, great devotees have preferences, right? One likes this sabji, one likes another one, and so on and so forth. So how will we look at that? Well, we'll think that Krishna likes to taste that sabji through this sadhaka, this devotee, and another through that, another through another. In time, I mean, I want to also one can see the nature of the devotee beyond his sadhaka deha coming out, being a factor. But this is the basic idea. That takes a little more spirituality to understand. This is a newcomer. This person was in a previous life. This was his situation. I can see this coming. He should be guided in this way, and so forth and so on. But in general, that is your criteria. There's the two energies. So you may move into one or the other, and it depends to what extent one is more absorbed. And there are the stages to help us appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. So I have a brief question before maybe Shraddha can ask hers. I have a question if you know anything about the origins of Ayurveda. So I scanned the Veda base, and actually there's not so much mention of it, except for Caitanya-Bhagavata. It says that, it mentions Dhanvantari, who was the inaugurator of the medical science and an incarnation of Lord Vasudeva. And then I was scanning just like generic websites, and they were all kind of citing the same story. I think they were just always taking the same source. And it says that Ayurveda is a science that originated from Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe, and that Ayurveda is attributed to Dhanvantari, who's the physician of the Devatas, and he received it from Brahma. So my question is just generally, how can I put this in my head together? Maybe it's a very stupid question. I was wondering if like Srila Prabhupada mentioned something about this, and if it's actually possible that an incarnation of Vishnu is kind of like below Brahma, like he is receiving the wisdom from Brahma. But I'm thinking, well, actually, like a Vishnu avatar is like much higher than Brahma. And yeah, what is the origin of Ayurveda in the end? That's just what I'm wondering. if you maybe know a little bit.
Oh, I think that first of all, Ayurveda is a medical science, and there are many sciences. Like there's the Dhanurveda, for example, to learn about military arts. There's the Ayurveda. Ayur means life, so it's a life science. It's medical science. So the Vedas are Nigamakalpataro, Galitam. And there are three, like analogies given, the metaphors given, of many branches of knowledge. And so there are different arts and sciences and so forth, and sections of the Veda that deal with them. So with regard to life science or medical, that's called Ayurveda. So the origin is the Veda. Now, the Veda has no origin. So it's thought to be coexisting with Bhagwan, right? Is breath, something like that. And so the fact that there is a form of Bhagwan as Dhanvantari that personifies the Ayurveda, let's say presides over that. In the Bhagavatam and other texts, creation stories, you find the churning of the ocean of milk, and Dhanvantari came out of that, among other things that came out. So Brahma's work is also the work of creation. Now, Brahma's work of creation is not his work alone. Therefore, we find it in the Brahma Samhita, praying to Krishna for the power to do the work of creation and to do it in such a way that he'll not be distracted by that work from the more important goal of attaining love for Krishna. This is how he prays. So he's taught how to do that. So Brahma's work of creation is also taught there that is an empowered work. So his creation is a secondary creation. So there's sarga and visarga, right? So there's the initial manifestation of the world on the part of Mahavishnu, and then there's an organizing of it through sound, just like we organize things through sound. We call this a glass, this a table. We give names to it, and things are organized. So through sound, if you will, he manifested the Vedas. He's not the source of the Vedas, but they were manifest through him, empowered to do so. He was by Bhagwan. That was his task. Now, sometimes also the seat or the the position, the post of Brahma, different types of disciplines can afford one the opportunity to attain the post of Brahma. Typically, it's thought through karma, marg, and the observance, for example, of varnashram perfectly. Excuse me. Yeah. It's my leg.
Huh?
Scorpion.
Okay.
They're not too ferocious. He made them too. So Brahma. Anyway, through sound, he manifests the Vedas. Now, I was saying, so a different person may attain the post of Brahma. So 100 lifetimes of perfectly executing varnashram, one can become a Brahma. Now, one can also, through Gyan, can become a Brahma. And also, sometimes there, you have to transfer this scorpion. There. A moment. We see, for example, in Ved Bhagavatam, to Gopa Kumar, who's a devotee, became a Brahma for a while. So it's a position. And Brahma manifests. Sometimes Bhagavan himself takes the post of Brahma. That's also a possibility. But anyway, Brahma manifests the Vedas, but that he didn't write them there. He's at the origin of them, and so on and so forth. So Brahma manifests the Veda, and within the Veda, the Ayurveda is there as one of the sciences. In that sense, it comes through Brahma, but it has its origins that precede its manifestation in the world. But in general, I mean, for a general audience, this is a science from the Vedas. Vedas are eternal, so this is its medical science. Ayurveda. Yes.
And so Dhanvantari is more like a patron saint. He's taking care of this, something like this.
Well, he's the, what was called the presiding deity of the Ayurveda. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
He's Vishnu.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, devotees, for taking the scorpion away. Awesome. Okay. So yeah, that really helped me. So Brahma is actually not the creator, but he's the manifester. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Hare Krishna. Jai.
What else?
So there are two people. Oh, is there a question there?
I think I would say Shraddha Devi, she has a question. Or follow up.
Krishna. Okay, I'll go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. I'm just reading the Krishna book. So it's a chapter in there, a nice chapter where Lord Krishna meets his friend, Brahma.
I'm not sure your internet connection is that good, and I can't. You're breaking up very, very badly. Maybe you want to write the question.
Yeah, I will. I will have the other question first.
Okay. Then we'll take it from the chat. Okay, if you want to write it down. So.
Yeah.
Should we take another question in the meantime? Moderator, help.
Oh, Shraddha, can you mute yourself?
Can you say that again? Repeat that. I can chat. I can put it. I can type it in the.
Okay, I'll mute her. There you go. Okay, sorry about that. So Kanurang has a question as well.
Okay.
Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Good morning.
I have my question is from Caitanya-Bhagavata. This is after the dream of Lord Chaitanya, dreaming that Lord Nityananda will appear in Navadvip, and then when Nityananda arrives and stays at the home of Nandanacharya, then Lord Chaitanya sends devotees like Srivasa and Haridas to find him. So I'll read you this verse because the verse seems a little cryptic, and then Bhakti Siddhanta gives a purport that's a little cryptic, and I was wondering if you have some insight. It says, devotees like Srivasa certainly know the truth regarding Nityananda, but for some curious reason they could not find him. And then Bhakti Siddhanta writes, there are many mysteries in the pastime of unsuccessfully searching for Sri Nityananda Prabhu, exhibited by the eternally perfect associates of the Lord like Srivasa Pandit. Baladev Prabhu hid himself and did not show his form to Haridas and Srivasa Pandit. He has thereby shown that the eternal absolute truth cannot be seen through external practice or designation. So I'm not sure what he's hinting at, external practice or designation, or how those might be tied to Srivasa and Haridas.
Right. Well, I think they're only tied to Srivasa and Haridas in the sense that an example is being shown to others who that would pertain to. So sometimes the devotees of the Lord are used to act in such ways as to teach us. So it's not the statement there at Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura. It's not that Srivasa or Haridas only have external vision and therefore they couldn't see, but that they're being used to teach that. And in general, the idea that Atashu Krishna Namadi Nabhavin Granamindri. With material senses, one cannot see the Lord. When the Lord wants you to see him, then you can see him. So, and that would be true for anybody, for even an advanced devotee. So Balaram, Nityananda Ram came and didn't want to be seen. And then when he wanted to be seen, with the approach of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Nandana Acharya's house, then he showed himself, right? Otherwise, it's also a fact that in the manifest presence of Nityananda Prabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made a great effort to make sure that he was not misunderstood, because here he is, he's Bhagavan, he's Balaram, but he acted in ways that were sometimes controversial. And so Mahaprabhu was always quick to correct the devotees or to point out the divinity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the divinity of Nityananda Prabhu himself. So the lesson is that to understand Bhagavan, it requires association and purified senses and so on and so forth. One would think the deity is the stone unless they've heard from a Vaishnava and have faith and applied themselves in terms of how to approach the deity and had experience ultimately. To one extent or another, they'll think it's a stone statue. So that's the basic principle. Kind of a simpler point. I think Bhaktisiddhanta is just taking the opportunity to make that point. Meanwhile, Nityananda Prabhu showed himself when he wanted to show himself. And when did he want to show himself? He wanted Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself to come and find him out and point him out to everyone. All right?
Yes, thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. What else?
So I'm not seeing, somebody there? Question?
Unless Shraddha Devi's written hers out and you want to read it in the chat.
I'm not seeing it here, but she might have sent, here it is. In the Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada's summary study of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, it says that a man in perfect knowledge knows that every man has a preordained amount of happiness and distress in this world. He should not seek any more than is given to him. Is this material happiness / distress?
Yes, he's saying that we have our karma. So we are allotted a certain amount of happiness, a certain amount of distress. And the teaching is, rather than to pursue one, avoid the other, and be riding on this roller coaster of pursuing happiness and avoiding distress, we should focus on service to Bhagavan and keep an even keel in either case. Whether the result is material happiness or material distress, we're transcending it. So it refers to karma, yes. That said, and that it's a true statement, and there are scriptural texts to that effect. Tasyaiva hetu prayate kovito labhite jnanam. Anyway, Bhagavatam, tasyaiva hetu. But that's basically the teaching that we shouldn't be moved by the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of distress, but by something that transcends both of them, which of course is service to Bhagavan. But that said, I guess there's an appearance of being able to increase one's happiness and avoid one's distress by the efforts that one makes, and so on and so forth. But aside again from devotional service, it's all in the realm of karma. So you've got this momentum that you're following, and so on. So it's statements like that are meant to help us unplug from the pursuit by seeing that even my pursuits are something that's already kind of like programmed in. It's my prarabdha karma. Looks like I'm doing it, but it's actually the program playing itself out. And let me unplug from the program here and pursue Krishna service, whether it's difficult or not difficult, according to in terms of my my senses in my mind. And times may be difficult, times may be easy. That's not our concern either. Concern is to serve Krishna. That way you transcend this. That the basic idea is this summum, equibalance. So that's yoga. Now we take that and add service to that. So there's some activity there. Love has an orbit of its own, right? Does that help? Yeah, let's see. Okay, what else? Okay, we have a question here. Madhavi.
Yeah, I read this line from Swami that says.
From who?
Swami.
Who, Swami? Radhanath Swami. Okay, she has a quote from Radhanath Swami.
Humility is a natural symptom of those who love God. To God.
Humility, what? I can't quite hear.
Humility is a natural symptom of those who love God.
Those who love God.
And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains to us in the third verse of Sikshastakam that we should be more humble than the fallen leaves and more tolerant than a tree. But how as this is a mention as a natural symptom, the humble.
So the quote says that humility is a natural symptom of devotion. It's kind of concomitant to devotion. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches that we should be humble. So it seems like the dilemma is, well, if it's a natural thing, then why do we have to make an effort for it? It's natural. Well, I think we make an effort for bhakti. We progress on the path of bhakti through grace and through effort. I often say that our effort is to get grace, to position ourselves such that we can take advantage of the grace rather than an effort that is like ascending. By my effort, I will go there. I make an effort to get grace, and by that I can go there. So there is a place for effort in bhakti, and it'll be more apparent in the early stages that the effort is prominent. So when we make an effort for bhakti, then as that bhakti comes, humility will come as well. Because, as he said, it's concomitant to bhakti. All the good qualities, all the qualities of devotees, I think they're listed maybe Chaitanya Charitamrita, 26 qualities of devotees. They all center around being a devotee, period. I forget what the term is, but so they all kind of orbit around that must be in place, and that will result in those qualities coming within us. So, after all, how can you make an effort for bhakti when bhakti involves seeing yourself as a servant, having knowledge of who Bhagavan is? How can you not feel humble? Right? So the two are intertwined, so much so that in Prem Bhakti, now he doesn't seem to be referring to this because he quotes a verse that's relative to Nishta, Trinadapi Sunichena. With this kind of disposition, this kind of humility, chanting, then quickly you make progress. But later in Prem, Sanatana Goswami explains in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that Prem begets humility, humility begets Prem. They're more or less synonymous. That way you can see it's a feature. It actually is bhakti. But if you play out again the knowledge, here's Bhagavan, this is the knowledge within Bhakti Sambandha Gyan. What is his position? What is my position? How can you think of anything other than, your position is a humble one? So they're concomitant. But I think that at the same time, when we practice bhakti, we can be affected by pride, which is our material conditioning. We have material conditioning, which in the whole way of material life is to push, right, on others to get ahead and so forth. You can see it in the animal kingdom. There's a struggle, right, for asserting self-assertion. So this is the natural tendency. We've been going on this way since this direction since time immemorial. So we take up our course is intercepted by bhakti through sadhusanga. We like the idea, but we have this momentum at the same time. And so the self-assertion in an inordinate way that doesn't correspond with self-assertion as an instrument of bhakti, or in pride, there's a place for it to come. So we have to watch out for it, push it down. And you can say this is the cultivation of bhakti. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura once gave a famous lecture. I think it was titled "More Humble Than a Blade of Grass" on the day of his appearance day, when he was sitting on a high seat and everybody was praising him. And he said, "This, what does this have to do with being more humble than a blade of grass?" And so he asserted that humility is absence of the enjoying spirit, for one, but moreover, humility is not abstract, but before Bhagavan, before Guru. So to do the bidding of the Guru is what it means to be humble. And if the Guru says you should sit on the seat, and then you humbly have to sit on the seat and take respect for Bhagavan, for Guru and Krishna from others. We don't, I think this is kind of really related to your question. We don't cultivate humility independent of bhakti. We cultivate bhakti, and in the context of bhakti, we in the early stages, we want to watch out for false pride and not let us get the upper hand and so on and so forth. And indirectly, I say that's a cultivation of humility. But it's commitment to bhakti. Make an effort for bhakti, and you'll be humble.
This question.
Yes, follow up.
That so you were saying something about
Self-assertiveness, yeah.
Self-assertiveness connected to pride. I was just wondering how, in the attitude of service, trying to constantly serve, how to, I guess, utilize self-assertiveness in a way that
For bhakti.
So you can.
Yeah, how can you use self-assertiveness for bhakti? Well, you have to say, no, it's not like that. You have to assert yourself for bhakti. You have to represent bhakti. This is the teaching. So you see, for example, someone is giving the opposite teaching and thinking it's bhakti, then you're going to assert yourself and say, on behalf of bhakti, on behalf of Guru Maharaj said this, and you can assert yourself, no, he said that in this circumstance, and this is what he meant, and it doesn't apply to this circumstance. And so you're asserting, there's a self-assertiveness, but you're doing so on behalf of. So it's all a question of who you're representing, properly representing the teaching, the example of the Guru, Vaishnavas, and so forth. So there's a place, sure, we can use everything, all of our, we can express all of our emotions and use all of our motor senses in bhakti. Why not?
Where does that authority to do that come from? That look like, is it like the self authority debate?
Well, where does the authority to do that come from? The more you understand bhakti, the more you've applied yourself in bhakti, the more you are doing bhakti, the more you can assert yourself. You can assert what bhakti is through your example, through your teaching. But our authority, if you will, to act on behalf of bhakti comes from our guru. So our standing in bhakti should be determined by how we see ourselves in relation to our superiors. How what is our attitude in terms of those who, from whom bhakti has come to us, our guru, the senior Vaishnavas, and so forth. If we have not much regard for them, but we're making new people and so forth, what are we bringing them to? Our own idea. So the whole, you're asserting yourself for bhakti, so you're doing it on behalf of someone, right? Someone you're doing it for, right? There's a chain of command, if you will. It's common sense. What else? Oh, I guess we're over time now, huh?
Yeah, it's 15 past.
Okay, well, nice to be with all of you. Please try to tune into the classes, and hope to be with you next Sunday.
Thank you very much. Haribol.
Bye.
Just a quick note for everybody. So the classes are from, Guru Maharaj, you can log off. I'm just going to be embarrassed. There you go. Okay, so the classes are from Tuesday to Friday at 11 a.m. Costa Rican time. And then there's, of course, the Sunday classes as usual. And it's going to go on for another maybe 10 days or something. Guru Maharaj is flying back on the 15th. So he'll probably end the class series around the 13th or so. But yeah, tune in, and I hope to see everybody there. Although I'm not going to be there because I'm too busy with the water catchment. But I hope